The world keeps changing. People keep evolving. It's nice to meet you, Elliot. So by the time this goes up, which will be 2 days after it has been made public, then you are probably aware of Elliot Page. Now, I am going to use his previous name, his dead name, just once for clarification in case anyone is not up to speed. I'm going to stop myself there because what I thought I needed to do was to say Elliot's dead name at least once to be sure everyone knew who I was talking about. However, this situation, that should not be necessary because, much to my surprise, IMDb, Wikipedia, and Google have completely updated all of his references. So you can now say, hey, Elliot Page came out as trans. And if people say, who's that? You can just say, hey, let me show you on the IMDb page. And they will realize immediately, oh, same actor as Juno, same actor as Umbrella Academy. No need to dead name, not even for clarification. Wow, the internet actually worked for once. Anyway, breathe a sigh of relief and I'll hand it back to me. Elliot is trans non-binary. And I'm really excited that he's come out. But obviously, if you're not overly steeped in LGBTQ queerness, like I am, obviously, you might have questions, you might have points of confusion. So I want to help, and then I want to tie this in directly with Umbrella Academy and the possible future of that show. So if you're here for that, stick around, I'll get there. But first, we have to talk about how we talk about these things. When you're talking about a public figure or even someone who you know personally, when you're conversing with someone who does not know them post-transition and only knows them pre-transition, that is a situation where you will probably have to use their dead name at least once to be sure that the person you're speaking with knows who you're talking about. After that, though, you should not be using their dead name. That's why it's called a dead name, because it's dead and buried. That is not their identity any longer. And if you use it by accident, that's fine. Correct it, and definitely don't get angry with anyone who catches it and corrects you. Which brings us to pronouns. I'm going to be using he and they, even if I make any reference to roles that Elliot has played previously, such as, say, Juno, which was the role that he got an Oscar nomination for. Now, even though at the time Elliot was presenting as a woman, I almost said identifying as a woman. I don't know what his timeline was. I don't know how he identified at the time. But regardless, that's not who he is now. And this is kind of a bit of trans conversational etiquette. When you refer to a trans person, even if you are referring back to events or things they did prior to their transition, you still use their current preferred name and pronouns. Now, I understand that can throw you off and be a bit weird and confusing, and it can take a little work to get into your headspace, but here's a way to think about it. How do you talk about the actor Tyler Perry and the character Medea? Pretty sure if you've ever referred to either one, he's the actor, she's the character. It's the same with Elliot. All of the female roles that Elliot played are still female roles. Those roles, those characters don't suddenly become trans retroactively. You don't have to start using male pronouns to refer to the character of Juno, even though you need to now be using male or they, them pronouns to be referring to Elliot, the actor, even if you're referring to the acting work he did way back in something like Juno. But that's the comparison to keep in mind. He, they, actor, she, character. It's actually not as confusing as people tend to make it out. What can be confusing is when we have to overwrite the defaults and the things that we've been using for a while. That can be tricky, but the general concept is not hard. You're probably already doing it with other people. So with all that having been said, and now that we've covered how to discuss Elliot, let's talk about Elliot's acting prospects. And specifically, I do want to focus on Umbrella Academy because that puts us in a fairly unique position. Because broadly speaking, in terms of things like film roles, Elliot will make his choices with his current, now out, publicly known identity in mind. But Umbrella Academy is an ongoing show, and the character that he plays, Vanya Hargreeves, is already established as female. Now, first I want to tackle a number of the things that I've already seen come up, sometimes being asked sincerely, well, what about this? And sometimes being stated in bad faith as reasons why this somehow isn't okay, and we need to recast or whatever else. Anyone who is giving you a reason why Elliot can no longer play Vanya is either a transphobe arguing in bad faith or someone who is parroting the arguments of transphobes originally made in bad faith. And whether they know that or not, that's still what it ties back to. Yeah, I'm not going to mince words about that. I will still address all of the concerns, and I'll do so as if they were good faith, but most of them aren't. So, let's talk about a few things. First off, every indication is that Elliot will remain in the show. In fact, shortly after Elliot came out and made his identity and truth known to the world, Netflix tweeted out that they couldn't wait to work with him in season 3 of Umbrella Academy. Now, we should also clarify where Umbrella Academy is at this point. Their renewal for season 3 was only confirmed last month. So their shooting is scheduled to begin in February. I could not find a reliable source on how far along the scripting is. Now, presumably they would have been working to some degree on scripts, maybe hadn't locked it all down yet, waiting for the renewal. But there is time between now and when shooting starts. There's several months. Now, that's not enough to, if the decision was made, and we'll deal with the possibilities in a minute. But if the decision was made to integrate a trans narrative into Vanya's story in Umbrella Academy, there may not be the time to work in a completely from the ground up edition or anything that would require new locations, new actors not already cast, and things like that. Because even though shooting doesn't start till February, between now and then is when the logistics are worked out, schedules are locked down, locations are secured, etc., etc. However, that would not preclude them from altering scenes and rewriting certain things to allow for that narrative to be worked into whatever else is already going on, so long as it doesn't require new locations, new characters, etc. Because that kind of stuff also ups your budget. So there is time for them to do any number of things. But the questions that come up are, can Elliot, a trans non-binary person, play what has up to this point been a cisgender woman? And the answer to that is, of course he frickin' can. Now, I'm not even going to entertain the whole, what you're saying, a trans person can play a cis part, but you've said before that cis actors can't play trans people. Yes, I have, and refresh yourself on the video where I talked about that, because I'm not entertaining that argument here. Yes, he can play a cis woman. No, cis people can't play trans characters. Not right now. No. So let's tackle some of the things that I see being brought up, mostly in bad, this first one especially, is almost always in bad faith. The idea often gets floated that he couldn't play Vanya because it would give him dysphoria to play a woman. First of all, I hate seeing that come up. It's one of the things I've been meaning to tackle for a while. Dysphoria is incredibly personal and specific to every individual who experiences it. A. B. Not every trans person has dysphoria, or at least not severe dysphoria. It's part of the narrative in pop culture that people transition because their dysphoria is so bad, that's what they have to do. That is not the truth for all trans people. And let us not forget, Elliot is an actor. It is not unreasonable to assume he's capable of taking on a part without it triggering dysphoria. Is it possible for Elliot or any trans actor to experience debilitating dysphoria by having to portray a gender that they once were forced to present as and may have trauma related to that? Yes, that is possible. But you cannot take it as a given. Unless Elliot says, I can't play a cis woman because of my dysphoria, then this option isn't on the table. You don't get to decide in advance that he can't play this part because of that. Only he can say whether or not dysphoria is an issue for him. So drop that one. So unless he says otherwise, Elliot is absolutely fully capable of slipping back into the character of Vanya and playing Vanya as a cis woman. It's also an option to introduce trans elements into the character. Anyone who brings up the idea that, well, they can't do that because that's not being true to the character. Hold up. Do you have any idea how many changes have already been made to these characters in this adaptation? Sticking on Vanya specifically, Vanya's sexuality, so far as I could find, is never addressed in the comics. And yet she is now established as being bisexual in the show. So we've already deviated right there. In the comic, all of these characters are white, like really white. We have a very mixed ethnicity group in the show. They're not obligated to stay true to every single detail of these characters. They're allowed to do their own thing. They already have done with Vanya, with her entire story and character arc in the second season was based around material not in the comics. So if your concern is it's not being true to the character, you shouldn't even be watching the show anymore. You would have had to have written it off. Heck, season 1, definitely season 2. So don't come at me with that one. Umbrella Academy has a unique opportunity to integrate a trans actor's story and life experience into a character not originally designed for that story. But you can still bring those things in. I've talked about this sort of thing before when I talked about characters who were turned gay later in their life, but were not originally written to be that at their initial conception. There's the thing. So there is a validity to doing that, because a lot of people either come to a realization about themselves later in life, or even if they don't come out until later in life, as Elliot himself is evidence of. That having been said, just because they have the opportunity doesn't mean that they have to take it. Maybe Elliot doesn't want his transition to be highlighted in the work that he does. Maybe they can't figure out a way to integrate it cleanly. There's any number of reasons for them to not do it. So I also want to be clear that while I think it's an opportunity and I would kind of like to see it addressed in some fashion, the show isn't obligated to, and I would not be mad at it if it doesn't. Because it's still the same character, it's still the same actor who is very good in the part. How that actor is identifying away from the part, having changed, doesn't affect any of that. So those were all the major points that I wanted to hit in talking about Elliot having come out and its ripple effects on Umbrella Academy. So, thank you for listening. Be polite. Use correct pronouns. Don't dead name. And we'll all move forward. So, thank you very much for watching. Usual stuff. Like, share, subscribe. Got a Patreon. It's how I pay my bills. And it is greatly appreciated. Keeps the lights on around here. But you also don't have to do any of it. Because, end of the day, you are the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.